Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to Straight to the Core, an in-depth, no-nonsense look at all things physical therapy, wellness, and the business of being healthy. We are your hosts. I'm Claire. I'm Mark's wife.
And I'm Mark. I'm Claire's husband.
Speaking of the business of being healthy, today we're pivoting a little bit. We're going to do a little business-related rant.
Yeah, we're probably going to get a little bit angry on this one.
Right.
I feel like I am.
But I feel like it's something that everybody can relate to, and we had a recent event that kind of tied into this nicely. And it is tipping culture.
Tipping culture.
And expectation versus reality
Correct.
That's going on right now.
The first thing I want to say is, when I grew up, tipping was something you had to earn, not something that you expected.
You grew up many years ago.
Many decades ago.
Yes.
But in my day, you worked hard to earn a tip. You didn't expect one unless you earned the tip.
I was once told that TIP, T-I-P-S, stood for to ensure prompt service. But now that I'm saying that, ensure would be E.
Yeah.
Ensure?
Yeah. I don't know.
To instill prompt service. So basically, it's something that the worker worked for, right?
Correct.
Like, I'm working for tips, and I'm going to work hard for you because the expectation is then if I work hard for you, then you're going to tip me.
Correct.
Now, I think we should start off this rant before we get too angry by saying I'm perfectly fine tipping in scenarios that there is a service-related industry, right? Like we are probably some of the only people that when we go on vacation and we're at an all-inclusive, we bring singles.
A lot of singles.
Yes.
And we tip very well.
And we are tipping. In Mexico, there's one resort that we go to. Shout out to the LeBlanc Cancun and LeBlanc Los Cabos. There are some fantastic workers there, and it is a resort that we have gone back to time and time again just because the expectation meets, or their product meets our expectations. And
every time.
Happy to tip there because there are people that are going above and beyond. There are, a poolside bar or a swim up bar that I feel like in a very weird way, Mark and I are the only ones that are like, well, here, let me fish out like my sort of damp $2 to tip you for the drink because that's what our expectation is.
Correct.
Right? Like,
and if we're at the pool hanging out and I got my, pool hat on that Claire hates that I've had for 10 years.
It's in every picture of every vacation
so
we've
I
ever
keep
been
dollars in my hat, right? Swim up bar, they don't get a lot of tips because nobody has tip money because they don't have anything to put it in. But I put it in my hat and I will not get a drink unless I have money to tip.
Correct. And there have been many a times that Mark will say, do you want another drink? The answer is always yes. I don't know why he asks. But he goes to the bar and I swim across to where our bag is so that I can get $2. The same thing happens, though, when we're on vacation and, I want my morning mimosa, is that I tip the waitress pretty heavily initially with the expectation that she's going to be like, haha, I just got $10 for that one mimosa or those two mimosas. I'm going to keep going back. And then that is that's the transaction.
And
right?
at the end of the day, we tip out again.
Right. So before we get too angry in what we're about to talk about with tipping culture nowadays and expectation
we
versus
tip
reality,
very, very well.
We tip very well. And from a math perspective, I'm the daughter of a math teacher. I usually default to 20% when we're at a restaurant, right? Well, it used to be.
As your minimum, yes.
Yes, minimum. You move the decimal spot, people, and you double it. It's fine. You move the decimal spot one over. That's your 10%.
It's very easy.
If your order was $28, you move the decimal $2.80. I round up to $3. You double that. That's $6 tip. Cool.
I will say this is a little unfair because everything literally has doubled in price. Then the people who are making tips, their salaries essentially have also doubled. My salary hasn't doubled.
I mean, right.
Well, they've gone up by multiples. So if a meal was $100, it's a $20 tip.
But you're
$25.
also
now it's $200.
Going off of the fact that in a true tipping wage, right? Minimum wage is like $2 something.
Yeah.
Right.
Like
so, but if we're going to dive into, now that we've established that Mark and I are more than happy to tip when the circumstances,
appropriate.
Yes. Why am I tipping for everything nowadays?
Well, that's the problem. Everybody wants a tip, right? If you make servers' wages, you get tips. That's part of the expectation. If you're making me a coffee at Starbucks and it takes you 30 seconds and you're making $17 an hour, you ain't getting no tip.
Yeah, I will out myself here. Is that I I don't ever tip my barista. I don't go in very often. Usually if I am ordering Starbucks, then we have one of our
They're not making tippers wages.
Right. No, I get that. I get that. But it doesn't occur to me because my expectation is that they're making like $13, $15, $17 an hour, which is great. You know what? That's great. And some people do tip on top of that. I use the Starbucks app from time to time. I'm not like a heavy Starbucks drinker, but
because it's garbage.
It's not my favorite coffee. But I will take it for anybody out there listening who is thinking like, I wonder if I should get Claire a coffee. Yeah, I'll take it. Totes. But I actually don't even know on the app how you can tip.
Yeah, I don't know.
Because very often what I will do, and this I guess is my version of tipping, is that if I have an employee go grab coffee, then I buy their coffee.
Correct.
But I don't understand why I am tipping for literally everything nowadays.
So you pick up a takeout menu, right? Takeout menu item. They want you to tip on that.
Yes.
Well, I wasn't waited on.
Right. And that's kind of like a gray area to me because I understand like being waited on, right? Somebody's coming to check to see if I need more water. Somebody's coming to check to see if I need a refill, if I want anything else. Yeah, do you have silverware? Do you need another napkin? Do you need sauce? Do you need salt?
That's a service.
I get that.
I tip for that.
The gray area of takeout born in the era of COVID is confusing to me, which is why it's a gray area, because I'm like, yeah, I mean, there was a service because you literally made food and you boxed it up.
That's what happens at McDonald's, and nobody gets tipped at McDonald's.
I know, but I don't know the ins and outs of the restaurant industry in the sense of who, now post-COVID, right? Like who's still getting paid tipper's wage? Yeah,
well, the cook isn't.
Well, probably not. And back in my Dairy Queen days, there were all those things that I did. I didn't get tipped.
Yeah, you never got tipped.
No.
Do you ever get a tip there?
I did once in a while, but it was like $1.
Yeah.
That someone, if we brought the food out to people, people would be like, "Oh, what's my number for food?" I'm like, "No, trust me, I write down like gray sweatshirt."
It's called good customer service.
It is. But nowadays, I don't know if I'm ordering food and I'm picking it up, right? Are these servers that are still getting tip wages in terms of they're making like I don't even know. I should look that up. What is tip wage?
I don't know.
But are they still working for that hourly wage that would necessitate a tip? Or are they getting paid $15 an hour and I'm the sucker who's like, yeah, I'll tip 25% and all you did was like put it in a bag and then I came in and I waited in line and I swiped my own card and that sort of thing. What is tip wage?
Yeah, you know what? This is going to be a real interesting episode. Stay tuned.
It is $2.13 per hour.
So, it's nominal. It's like basically nothing.
Yeah. Oh, that's minimum wage for Nebraska for tipped employees. Yeah. Tips must be, however, the total of the employee's wages and tips must be at least the state's minimum wage of $12 per hour. If the total is not enough, the employer must make up the difference.
I'm sure that never happens.
Employers can take a tip credit up to $9.87 per hour as long as the employee's tips bring their total compensation up to $12 per hour.
Who keeps track of that? And first of all, nobody reports all their tips. Nobody does that.
But I guess, again, going back to the fact that like when we were at bar age, which I don't necessarily know if we are anymore, but when I went to places with that expectation that I'm going to stand like 3 people deep, right, in a bar to get a drink instead of sitting. Just the fact that I said stand ages me. But it was like you tipped well to get good service. If I wanted to have the bartender pay attention to me, I made sure that I was polite, I was courteous, I wasn't loud, and I tipped well.
Yeah, but it also depends. Are you ordering a beer or a mojito?
Right. So then now there's that aspect of it is that now, since obviously credit cards are so prevalent everywhere and cash is not as prevalent, and this is probably the one thing that really set this podcast off in motion that we were like, oh, we got to talk about this, is that now when I go to check out, and let's even take out the weird things that this is an option for nowadays. Let's say I literally am going in and I'm getting a drink and I'm paying with a credit card. It's not, oh, do you want to tip 10, 15, 20%? And you're like a really good tipper if you tip 15%. Or when you used to get the printout of on the receipt where it was like, hey, we're going to do the math for you. Here's like 10%, 12%, 15% tipping. It's like, do you want to tip 20, 25, or 30%? I don't want to tip 30%. I will if I've had like the world's best experience at a restaurant and like the waiter or waitress is amazing and they have like exceeded my expectations and got above and beyond. I would be like, you know what? I'm gonna add a little extra to your tip. 30% should not be an option for just like run of the mill. Hey, I did something. Your order is like $8.70. Do you want to tip 30% on top of that?
I mean, it's pretty common when we go out to dinner, we're going to tip 20%. And that's unfortunate because there's some pretty like mediocre experiences that I'm still tipping 20%. I probably shouldn't, but I don't want to be that guy that doesn't tip. But
and then
like
your food gets spit in next time.
Yeah. The problem though is like everybody expects all these tips, but they don't want to earn them. And how many good experience do you have with in the last year or two? Like really good experices with servers. It's not that common anymore. It's an anomaly now. It's an anomaly because now that it's all expected.
So
it's a society problem, for the love of God.
That sort of thing enrages me. But what perplexes me is when tipping is an option for things that I was in no way, shape, or form expecting to have to make a tip decision. For example, because I'm short, I have a lot of things altered. So I take my clothes into the alteration place at Oakview Mall, which is dying, sad. But the gal who owns the shop, she literally owns the shop. She's fantastic. She likes me. I like her. I think she has a very fair price for what she does. And I am more than happy to pay for, if I bring something in and I'm like, I need this in 3 days, I'm more than happy to pay that expedition fee. Why am I tipping on that? I mean, I don't. But it's an option because she uses a Square reader, and when I swipe my card and she hands it to me, tipping is an option. I am so caught off guard there because for me, I'm paying for a service.
Correct.
I expect whatever fees that she needs to be wrapped up in that price because I already know what the pricing is. So I am so caught off guard with that because I'm like, God, am I
to be fair
to not tip?
People very commonly tip barbers and hairstylists.
Correct.
Those are not cheap services.
No.
If I go get my hair cut by my barber, it's like $50 and I tip on that. That's not a cheap service for a half hour. That's actually pretty good money.
Yeah.
So those are some odd expectation caveats where you normally tip your hair people.
But, yes, Hair by Heather. I'm more than happy to tip her.
Yeah, I know. But like, why is that different?
No, I get that. No,
because they're making normal wages. They are not making servers' wages. So that is the exception to the rule that almost everyone tips on that.
So here's where I think that was born from. Excuse me.
Also, a massage would be the same thing.
Yes. Now, I think when more people worked for like big salons, we'll take it, right? Yeah. So there's the salon owner.
That's how they got paid.
And then they were paid a set rate.
Yes.
But then they had to pay a portion of that to the salon.
Correct.
And so then you tipped on top of that because you were like, hey, I think that your service was worth it. Now what happens is that then people go off on their own, and instead of them being part of a business that they have to give part of their wages to, same thing with, I guess, personal trainers as well. Then if you're giving away part of your wage, if you charge $100 for a men's haircut, and at the end of the day, that barber goes away with $40 because she has to pay, let's say, $20 for the products she uses, and then she has to give another $40 to the actual owner.
Yeah, that's different.
That's different. But what happens then is that people go off on their own. Yeah. Which is awesome. Absolutely. Go entrepreneurship. Do it.
And that's the way we do business too. We pretty much only do as much as possible with our
their prices. You would think their prices then
would reflect
what they want to get paid. Now I know you could charge that too, or you could say the same thing for healthcare. And I always say this is like, we do.
When's the last time you got a tip?
Well, no, I don't get a tip. But I'm saying is that people will
I'm
say,
really good at my job. I never get a tip.
Set your prices so that you can get the money that you want. And obviously we don't tip, or we don't receive tips. But we are in an industry where our prices are set based off of insurance.
Correct.
Now, if we don't want to take insurance and we need to do cash pay, then we can change our pricing structure. But insurance is great. Insurance can't be great. But that's a different scenario. So while I am more than happy to tip Hair by Heather because she's fantastic at what she does, and we have a great time, and she fits me in, and she gives a service that in my mind, I'm just like, okay, yes, this is the price of it. In reality, what she could do is say, I'm raising my prices, please don't tip me on top of it, and this is just my price. Now, I'm saying that as somebody who does tip her, so maybe she does do that, and I'm an anomaly in the fact that I'm tipping.
I don't think so. Everybody tips their hair people.
I mean, some people just don't tip. Going back to what we were saying is that when we were...
Do people really not tip?
Yeah, I mean, we see it at the resort all the time.
Yeah, but that's different.
People think I've already paid this.
Yeah.
And so I think that maybe that mentality
Do people not tip at dinner, though? I mean, does anybody really tip 10% at a decent restaurant?
I think if you do that, you're kind of like an a-hole, right?
Yeah, even when the service is bad. I give everybody a little bit of a leeway on that, too, because if the service is bad at a restaurant... This day and age, you don't know if 10 people didn't show up to work. So your service is bad because they're doing the job of 10 people and they're running around with their head cut off. As long as your waiter or waitress looks like they're working hard, I'll still tip, even if they're not that great, because they might be pulled in many different directions at the same time.
Or if there's an error with food, it's not necessarily my server's fault. It could be a problem with the server.
It could be the chef.
It could be the chef. Yeah, we had two back-to-back incidences. Well, not back-to-back, but two incidences that come to mind. Two totally different restaurants. I will not name the restaurants, but one restaurant we went to.
Which one is this? The one close to home.
The one close to home.
Oh man!
That Mark and I had a not stellar experience the first time we went, but it was very, very new. It was like it's a plane. It's fine.
There's an airplane going over. That's not good.
It's loud.
The Russians are coming.
We had a not great experience at this restaurant. Not terrible by any means, just not a not great experience. But they were new. It was like the hot, trendy restaurant. And we're like, oh my gosh, we went there and look at us. Aren't we cool? And we were like, hey, we'll give it another try.
And we did.
We did. We went back. And this particular, Mark had ordered a steak, one of the more expensive items, because that's how he rolls.
It was an $80 prime. Oh, no, it was an $80 ribeye.
Yeah. And it came out, he ordered it medium rare. It came out almost well done. Probably
like a medium well to well.
Yeah.
Okay, so it was not brought by my server. I was not asked to cut into this. Right. And this is like $80. So this is not a cheap steak. And this is not a cheap place. This is high-end dining pricing.
And other things in this second time that we went had been good, right?
Correct. But if my waiter had brought it out and I had cut into it, I'd be like, ooh, that is not medium rare.
Okay. So when we brought it, and Mark's not a complainer. If you know Mark, he is
complain about
absolutely
food.
Not a complainer, especially when it comes to food. Like Mark does not waste food.
And I didn't want to eat it. I didn't want to waste the food.
So by the time the waiter actually came out and we kind of were like, hey, this is like just not, it's an expensive steak. It was edible, obviously, but just not too.
Well, you could tell it was a good steak. And
yeah.
I kind of said basically, hey, I'm not I don't want a free steak. I don't want anything, but you got to tell your cooks, they really overcooked this steak. This is a really good piece of meat. And
the waiter's response was, I don't know, that looks right to me.
Okay, so when you have a medium rare, there's going to be some juice. There's no juice. No. There was no pink.
So
it was gray.
My meal was great, actually. And so Mark just said, well, that's fine.
I was going to eat it anyway because I wasn't going to wait 15 minutes to have the waiter come back. And I didn't want to wait another 15 minutes while they cooked my steak while Claire was done eating and waiting for me. So that isn't really that conducive.
So
now,
then
is it?
The manager came over
and I was I don't like the manager coming over because I don't want to be that guy complaining.
He was. And the manager was great. I mean, honestly.
Yeah, he was very nice.
It came and he was like, no, absolutely, you're correct. What do you want me to do? And we're like, no, nothing. Absolutely
he looked at my steak and he's like, yeah, that is way overcooked.
Right. So in that scenario, we talked about it at the time, is that like, how do I tip this waiter? Because it wasn't his fault that the steak wasn't cooked correctly, but at the same time, I feel like part of that tipping culture is like, hey, I'm giving you a service. Like, I'm of service to you. How can I make this right? And the fact that, I suppose there is value in the fact that he got the manager to come over, but
which I would have preferred not to involve.
I would have loved it just for the waiter to be like, you know what, you're right. Let me see what I can do about this. Yeah, and we weren't looking for a free meal by any means. Mark ate the steak.
It was a good steak, but it was way overcooked.
Now take that and then this back-to-back experience. We went 2 days ago to a new restaurant that opened up here in Omaha. And there was a lot of kind of like...
Very close to our work.
Yes.
You could probably figure out which one that was.
And we gave them a lot of grace because it was the
first week.
Yeah, first week. Absolutely.
And we knew this going in.
Yep. And we'll go back. We'll give them another try. I heard good things about it when they first opened. I think they were slammed. They were so busy.
Some of my items actually were very good.
Yes.
Very good.
But again, we kind of had an issue. We each ordered steaks, and we had an issue where somehow how Mark ordered his steak was how my steak was prepared, and vice versa.
Very much.
So I'm a solid medium.
Yes.
Mark is a medium rare. He would like to order rare, probably, if he could control it. Yeah.
Seared.
So we were kind of faced with this, like, ooh, how do we tip? It was not a cheap meal.
Yeah.
And how do we tip for this when I don't actually know? Because they were absolutely flip-flopped. And so I thought, well, is it the waitress who kind of like mucked up? And
or put the order in
wrong, or was it the cook or the chef that messed up? Am I really not going to tip her what I would have otherwise if it was his fault?
Yeah.
We also, and this is probably to our detriment, we didn't bring it up to her. I mean, I'm not going to say, hey, you overcooked the steak and you didn't cook the steak enough, and I just kind of
gave... That's just a royal pain in the butt.
Yeah,
and they were
I just gave Mark the middle part of my steak to eat, and there were other elements like that were so good. But now in this is an entirely offshoot of it. But in this particular restaurant business model, I guess, you have multiple people who are coming in to help you. You have somebody, we had a cocktail waitress who came and took our drink order. We had somebody else who brought out the food. We had our main waitress who we had asked questions to and had spoken to and had discussed menu options and things like that. So I realized if I'm decreasing the tip, I'm decreasing the tip for everybody. And especially in that scenario where I don't know whose fault it is.
Especially because it's a brand new restaurant.
Right. So those sorts of tipping quandaries, that is what I'm used to, of saying, hey, how do I tip because of this service? I am not prepared to question if I'm tipping for something like, hey, I'm checking out at a boutique and I'm given the option to tip.
Yeah. Well, going back to the conversation, the gold standard, at least on service, in my mind, in this town, I'll just use a name, is Mahogany.
Yes.
Okay, so you order steaks at Mahogany, and they come out, and the waitress or waiter, they bring them out, and you cut into them.
Well, you have a team as well. They
Correct.
say, this is who's helping you.
Hold on. They ask you with a flashlight to cut into them together, and they check it right there. Now, if one person's is overdone and not cooked to their liking, they take both of them away, which is a tragedy because these are probably getting wasted or the cooks are eating them or whatever. But if you were to take one away and you were to cook another steak for that person and then you would brought it back, then the other person's already done eating. Or if they waited, their steak would be cold.
Which is why they do that. Now, Mark and I have had nothing but amazing experiences.
Well, I wasn't done with that one.
Well, I was gonna say we we saw that happen.
Yes.
Go on.
Well,
I'm sorry.
Well, I just wasn't finished. Okay, so the restaurant we're talking about from 2 days ago is flirting with that price point of Mahogany. Now, if I'm going to Outback, I don't expect that kind of service. Don't at all, because it's Outback. That's a chain. That's a different level of dining experience. But when you're approaching $300 meals, you expect the meals to be pretty close, if not exact. That's an expensive meal. And so Mahogany is in that price range. This restaurant is flirting with that. And so I feel like if they're going to flirt with that price range, just like the aforementioned other restaurant that's close by to our home, you have to provide that service.
I would agree with that. And I keep reiterating this, is Mark and I are very, very happy to tip for a good service. But this tipping culture that has kind of like taken on a life of its own, where
it's
not
expected.
only like the expectation of not just a tip. Like, I get it, people are making $2 an hour.
That's
I
fine.
get that, but the expectation of like, hey, even crappy service, like your bare minimum option to tip, if you don't want to do the math yourself, right, is now 20%. Whereas I always grew up with 20% being like the highest. You could tip 10, you could tip 15, which is what I had always been taught growing up was kind of standard. And if you tip 20, you're like, well, you're a good tipper. Now 20 all of a sudden is like bare minimum. And the options for some of those is 20, 25, 30%. I don't want to tip 30% unless I want to tip 30%.
You need a really good dining experience to warrant a 30% tip. And I'm fine doing it, but because it doesn't happen that often, I'm not going right to 30%.
Right. Correct. But and now I'm trying to think of a different example besides my tailor. But there are more times than not that I will go to check out for something. And it's like, why is tip an option?
Well, I mean, like I said, number one is coffee.
Yeah.
People will feel obligated to tip if it's on the receipt. And
or
so
even,
it's almost like a scam.
Yeah, even fast food. Okay, maybe that's a really good example. Is it sometimes, and I get it, like credit card fees dig into that. But if I am given the option to tip on a fast food or a to-go order, and as a note, we're not talking about DoorDash. We're not talking about anything like that. We're talking about you actually. I have
never DoorDashed.
I have not either. I will get in my car and go.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Like let's take Panera for example. I haven't been to Panera in forever, but when you said DoorDash, then I thought of that. There's not really an element of service there, but now there's this trend that when you don't have the element of service, you're still expected to tip on service, and it's like, I just don't want to be the a-hole that doesn't tip. And so I'm so caught off guard.
I can be that a-hole. That's fine.
I guess it's kind of the same when you go and they're like, do you want to round up for $1?
To save the children.
To save the children. I'm like, no.
I paid my taxes, a lot of taxes. That's supposed to save the children.
Now, if it literally asked if I wanted to round up to the nearest dollar for cats, then I would.
Cats and dogs, yeah. I'd do it for a second.
But yep. I think it more so just takes me off guard, and then I kind of feel like I default to tipping because I don't want to be.
Well, they do. They guilt people into it.
You.
I bet they get just as many people as they don't. Yeah, it's like a scam. Maybe we should put on our receipts tipping.
I don't think we're actually allowed to. I think the insurance companies are like, hey, contracted rate, you're not allowed to charge patients for X, Y, and Z.
I think we're not allowed to charge. I don't know that we are not allowed to take tips. Although at the hospital, if you took more than $30, you had to pay income tax.
Yeah, I think there's like that ethical thing. But as a total side note, but related. So that expectation that you're paying for prompt service, right? This is just a timely little thing. We stayed up until the wee hours.
As did most of America.
Did most people to watch the Tyson Jake Paul fight.
If you want to call it that, it was more of a sparring match.
I would have to, and maybe this is how they do it. I would actually have to go back and see what we currently pay for Netflix each month. But what you're paying for and what your expectation is, what you're paying for, and then the reality of that is so different.
Oh, expectations.
They
should have seen this coming. They tried to do it with Love is Blind finale. They blew
the
that.
Reunion, yes.
Yeah, they did a live broadcast.
Did we not learn anything from Love is Blind?
It was a total disaster. They had to actually apologize and release it the next day as a taped show.
Yes.
Okay, so this is probably a year or two ago, and so they're attempting it again, and we knew it was going to be a problem, but not that bad.
I will say, and I don't know if this happened to anybody, but thank goodness our screen did not buffer when there was a small little shot of Mike Tyson's cheeks.
Yeah, that was really awkward.
That would have been horrible if that was stuck on.
So I don't know the ramifications, and I don't know that the money that was exchanged what it was, but the production value of the show that Netflix obviously contracted to carry was really bad.
Right.
It was bad.
Right. So then that ties in with this.
So I know. Thank God I didn't pay money for pay-per-view. I wouldn't have, but just in principle.
But I think you hit the nail on the head is that expectation of pay-per-view. So I'm paying for something. I'm paying for a service. And above and beyond what you would pay for. That is your expectation, or that expectation is set high when you are paying for a service. So then going back to tipping culture, and you talk about how I'm paying for this service and I have this expectation. the restaurant we went to Friday night, the one that's close to our work, I had to like hound somebody to grab a knife because when they brought the bread, there was butter, but there were no knives.
I just used a fork. There's no butter though either at one point.
No, there's butter. There was no butter last night. That's what you were thinking. Yeah. That butter was good actually. That was like a.
Oh, it was. It has some sweetness to it.
Yeah, but having
Irish butter.
Yeah. Kerrygold.
Yeah.
From Irish cows.
What's with the cows? Why do they produce different butter?
I don't know. Just the Irish know how to raise cows.
They're just happier, I guess.
But yeah, maybe. No grass, just hops.
They're free range cows. They don't die until they're 20 years old.
And that's fine. Like I don't care about having to do that. But then all of those things compounded. And again, I completely realize we're talking about a restaurant that literally just opened. So I
know, but my very expensive smoked old fashioned was one that I could have made at home for actually quite a bit better. It was very generic.
And then we're using very specific examples when this is something that is kind of
not as specific. Yeah.
But it's just now this reality of as prices go up and up, obviously not a political commentary, but just inflation's crazy right now, right? Like things that you used to pay. I don't know, Chipotle used to be like $14 and now your Chipotle is $20. Like that's a big, that I give the example all the time. Taco Bell, like the Loco box or whatever, used to be $5 and now it's like $7 or $8 for something that used to cost $5 and now it costs $7.
So
that's a large percent. That's like a 40% increase.
This brings me back to high school. So back when I was in high school, I had a friend and we would go to Taco Bell like after a workout, like on a Saturday, big workout. We were trying to get huge, swole. Yeah.
Gains.
We would order 15 tacos each. So 30 soft shell tacos. It was $15.85.
I believe
they
that.
would make us pull around to the front and bring it out to us because it was 30 tacos.
Well,
it was $15. $15 used to be so much money at Taco Bell.
I know.
Oh my God.
You used to, I mean, that was the whole thing about eating Taco Bell is you could scrounge around for change in your car and be like, I can eat at Taco Bell. We talk about this all the time. Arby's, 5 for $5.
Yeah.
And then it was 5 for $5.55. I don't even know what their deal is now, but it is like 2 for $5.
No, it's probably like $5.99 for one.
Yeah, probably.
And obviously,
and I get it, like the price of things
increases, right? But I don't know that the price of everything has increased that way. A TV is cheaper, like a lot of things have gotten cheaper. Cars have gotten so expensive. Oh my God.
Well, then with tipping, right? When tipping is a percentage. So it's not like we're sitting here saying, the industry standard is to tip $1 a drink. I mean, that's kind of what we do in Mexico.
And we've been doing that for years.
Right. But the industry standard is not tipping a set amount of money. The industry standard is tipping a percentage. So when the price of something increases, your tips automatically increase by percentages.
So everything increases at a higher rate then.
Right. So when we're sitting here saying, hey, something that used to cost $20 now costs $30. Okay. Your tip then increases from a $4 tip to a $6 tip.
Yeah.
But then why are we compounding that with saying, well, if you're tipping 20%, now you should be tipping 25, 30%.
Yeah. And therein lies the problem.
Yes.
So obviously this happens to every person as they get older. They start to see things change in society and they start to see things going up at a disproportionate rate to what they should be. And I don't think it's exclusive to being old, but obviously I feel old when I say, I used to be able to buy 30 tacos for $15. I made $7 an hour at the time. So I had to work 2 hours to pay for that bill, although only 15 were mine.
But I
never actually ate 15 tacos except at our taco once.
Well, that's it, yeah. Which if you're watching this and you're on our YouTube video, scroll down to the Mark versus Claire where Mark eats 15 tacos.
It's all on TV.
Yeah. It's great. It's great. But I think the same thing is happening though when you have this expectation of this tipping culture now, and for example, this Tyson Paul fight is that this expectation, and Netflix has not gotten cheaper. Netflix has only gotten more expensive, and that's fine. Like I understand everything gets more expensive. That's what happens.
But has it gotten better?
No, and that's thank you for taking my.
Oh, sorry.
But things haven't necessarily gotten better. Like a small amount of inflation, you understand. That's why people get like a 3 raise every year because it's a cost of living increase. But if things get slowly more expensive over time and they don't change, then you're like, okay, well, that's the price of doing business. If things jump up in price, whether it's tips or whether it's the price of goods and services or whether it's something like, hey, I pay for Netflix, and what you're receiving in terms of a service is actually declining, then you're kind of like, that increase is magnified.
Yeah.
And so the tipping culture itself, I think the part of it is just that things are expensive. And so the tipping makes it, you're more aware of how expensive it is because you're like, why I'm tipping on top of this. But then that expectation of tipping for things that don't need to be tipped for.
Yeah. I have a question that you should probably answer.
Oh dear.
When we were in Vegas last time and you got a couple of drinks at the pool.
I don't think you probably
want to know the answer to this question. It was like $50. What are you tipping on that? They're making like pre-made, like if I got a beer and it's $20 beer, what are you tipping on a $20 beer? All you did is open a can of beer and give it to me and say, here. What are you tipping on that?
So for that, it's circumstantial.
Yeah.
And this is partly my fault for what I'm complaining about. Is that, so when we tipped, or when I bought the pool drinks, right?
Yeah.
I tip a little heavier because I want the bartender who was there every day.
So answer the question, what were you tipping on that? I actually want to know. I don't want to know, but.
I bet. Well, for that, like I'm charging each time, right? So I bet 20%. I bet 20%.
So you're tipping $5 for a beer. $4 for a beer to open a beer and say, here you go.
We didn't order any beer in Vegas. So I'm just thinking of like what some of the receipts were. Let's say the receipt was like $38, $40 for 2 drinks.
These are served to us in plastic glasses.
Yes. I'm going to say that probably most of the drinks that we ordered poolside were like $36, $38, $40. So that I would
just
probably
round up to 50.
Yeah, I'd probably tip like 20%.
I
just do the quick math.
Which is like literally insane because the cost of living in Las Vegas is not that actually high.
No, exactly. I mean, you hit the nail on the head is that if I was at a bar in Omaha and there were 2 beers and it was like $8, I'd be like, here's a 10, whatever.
Yeah.
Like $1 a drink for tipping, right?
Yeah,
and that's what we do in Mexico. But in Vegas, where it was, let's say it's $38, then I'd be like, okay, $3.80 times 2, that's $4.
Like
yeah, so
totally insane.
Yes, but in that scenario, I am tipping because I want the bartender to recognize that I tip well, and then he'll come back to me.
Which is why I choose to drink.
If you guys listened to the podcast that we did where we talked about how Vegas was insanely expensive, then there was a scenario where we made a series of bad choices to buy Starbucks because we wanted to watch the Formula One race.
These were $100 coffees she made.
Yes, and then I skirted across to buy.
Is that including the tip?
Well, now I'm questioning it. That's what I was getting to. I bought 2 shots of vanilla vodka and 2 shots of Bailey's to put in our already like $40 worth of coffee. Yeah, Starbucks. I didn't tip as much because I wasn't going back there.
Okay. Taking a shot glass and pouring Bailey's in it is not like
Agreed. There was no
service.
mixing. He did offer. He said, "You want me to mix the vodka and the Bailey's?" And I said, "No."
Well, you could have. What does it matter?
Because I wanted more Bailey's, less vodka. But yeah, no, I definitely tipped less there. But it had nothing to do with how I perceived what the bartender was doing. It was more so that like, well, I'm not coming back to this bar, so I don't need you to
I'm not going to tip you $10 for 2 shots of Bailey's.
I think that scenario though, I was like, oh dang, I just spent a lot of money too.
These were $100 coffees, and you know what?
So,
they weren't.
So now
good
that you
enough.
say that, like I'm part of the problem. I'm complaining about something, but I'm part of the problem.
Well,
I'm
it's
enabling
the expectation.
It is. I mean, yeah.
So now the workers are expecting it too. So if you don't tip like an exorbitant amount of money, then you're like a bad person.
I think it's part of it is that when you get the receipt, and maybe that's what throws me. It's not even like when I'm using my credit card in like the terminal. It's you get a credit card receipt and it'll say tip on there, and you're like, I was not at all prepared to tip on there.
And most people don't want to write a 0 in there.
Right. If I actually even feel bad when I tip for my nails, because I get my nails done, and the only reason I get my nails done is because I touch people for a living, and if my nails are dirty, then people see that. So for my accountant who's listening. That's why it's a business expense.
It's work related.
When I tip for that, I almost always tip in cash for my nails because it's just like a set, like here's $20. I still feel like kind of a loser when I put 0 on the tip line.
Yeah.
Even though I know I'm tipping, but if anybody were to look at that and be like, what a broke, poor loser.
Here's another question. Does the place share tips? We go to a bar in West Omaha very often that shares tips, and I think that's unfair.
I do think it's unfair because you can have people who don't pull their weight.
It's a socialistic way to receive tips. And so your better waitresses or waiters are going to make the same as the ones who aren't as good. And so I think that's kind of unfortunate. And there's probably reasons to do that.
That's probably industry standard though, right?
I don't think so. I've been in bars in college, right? Like I worked at a bar all through college. That was absolutely not necessary.
Okay, but you got tipped by servers, though.
I got tipped by the bartenders, but the bartenders did share tips there, but I think that's a little different. We were very cash heavy back then. It was mostly beer, so everybody's just throwing it in the tip jar. But
okay, but that goes back to a different thought, though, is that so when we're in Vegas, right? Let's go to my bad decision on Sunday morning. Saturday morning, yeah. To buy 2 shots of vanilla vodka and 2 shots of Bailey's to put in our coffee because we were watching Formula One qualifying. It's fine, but the expectation under 5 years ago would have been I'm getting 4 shots. I'm going to tip maybe $5.
Yeah.
Because they didn't do anything.
Especially because they're not involved shots. They didn't have to be created. You're not making like a cement mixer.
There wasn't anything that happened other than he put 4 glasses out and he filled up 2 of them with one thing and he filled up 2 of them with the other. So how did we get from the expectation of like, hey, and I'll even round up. Like I ordered 4 shots. I'm going to tip $5. On top of whatever the alcohol costs, right? How did it now go to I'm using my credit card and I am now faced with, do you want to pay 20, 25, 30% on top of what these shots are?
Right.
Like, this is just a question. Comment below your answer if you're watching on YouTube. Is the expectation that we're just going to, hey, any tip is above and beyond and we don't really expect anything? Or are people like,
it's expected.
Let's get 'em.
Here's the problem too, is the credit card mentality.
Oh, well, okay. Now
So that's part of it too. People don't even know how much they're spending because they live in credit card debt. That's a whole new issue.
As a business who is offering credit card payment as a courtesy to patients who are paying their bill, we have to eat that like 3 to 4 to 6% credit card fees.
Which over a business like our size is not a small amount of numbers.
Right.
No, not even remotely.
So if you are tipping via your credit card, technically the person's, I don't know, like does the person get that whole tip?
Yeah, I don't know.
Or does the business still take a percentage of that to say like, well, you didn't actually get $6.
Is that a credit card transaction fee of
94% of $6?
Yeah, I don't know, but I think credit cards are a whole new problem that we could talk about at length, but people are out of sight, out of mind with that. When you had cash money and you were making money and you had cash
money,
you're throwing around tips, you knew how much money you were spending and how much money you had because it was in front of you. It wasn't a digital number that didn't mean anything.
Well, I think if you've ever been to an event, let's say, where there's a cash bar, like it's still the expectation of, well, I'll give a couple of dollars per drink. And we've been in the scenario where we were someplace, like when we go to the Humane Society gala, and sometimes we're prepared enough and we bring singles, and sometimes we're not. And sometimes we're like, crap, like, okay, I'm giving you a $20 tip. I'm just like on a hope and a prayer that the bartender remembers that I put a 20 in, right? I think it was a Seinfeld episode once where he like tipped and then the bartender didn't see him. And so he like tried to take the tip out to be like, hey, I'm tipping. And they're like, yo, you're stealing tips. Like that's kind of the thing that happens, right? But you probably hit it dead on, is that when you say like this credit card mentality, is that every single thing is like a credit card.
Boom, boom, boom.
Right? Yeah. And so you don't necessarily realize it. Now, if you have a tab and things are going on your tab and you have one credit card swipe at the end, you can tip. But I don't know, it's tough because I think the thing that we're not saying is that even though we've had some bad experiences with service, I think the service industry in general is kind of suffering. And you have two very distinct...
Oh, they just have a labor issue.
Yes, you have two very distinct camps. You have people who are like, this is my bread and butter. Like, I'm good at this and I'm making money because I'm good at it. And then you have the other people who are like, I'll make tips. Like, that's fine. I'm here. I showed up for work.
Yeah, there's a lot of servers actually, and I'm not going to just bash on the service industry. We've all probably worked it or should have in the future, but there's a lot of them, at least lately, that just look like annoyed that they have to serve.
I guess that's when it comes down to nuts and bolts. That's what it comes down to, is that if it's the service industry, well, not even the service, just tipping industry in general, whatever that service is, not just restaurants, not just bartenders, but any place that's offering a service, is that I think the vast majority of people are more than happy to pay for the service.
A good service.
But with an expectation of what they're receiving for that service. Yeah. And reality is, I think, more and more commonly not meeting those expectations. And instead of saying something about it and us being like, you know what, we're not going to tip that much, or we're not going to
I think we're all getting used to it.
Yeah, we're just like, oh, okay, well, that really sucked. And then we still pay it anyway.
But we're used to it. I think
we're enablers.
I think we all fall victim to that, is if the standard of practice for a certain profession goes down collectively for everyone, we get used to that new standard. Right. And now that's the standard.
Right.
Even though it's elevated or declined a certain amount.
When we talk about the Tyson Paul fight, right? Like, the vast majority of the time, overwhelmingly 99.9% of the time when we use Netflix, it's seamless. But this expectation then of us having Netflix work, and then it didn't on Friday night, but then, you know what, like, we're not going to do anything about it. People can sit there and be like, oh, I'm so angry. This
I mean,
is
we
so
didn't
annoying.
pay extra for it. That was
Right.
just part of the package.
Right. So, I mean, Netflix can just kind of shrug their shoulders and be like, yep.
I have a question. Did anybody that had Netflix watch that entire fight interrupted or uninterrupted?
I mean, we didn't even see the ending of the girl fight, which was a fantastic fight.
Which was a lot better, actually.
I don't know if you guys all had the similar experience, but Mark and I had it on. It buffered probably every 45 seconds, every 60 seconds, something like that. And we have high-speed internet. Mark's a gamer, so we pay for
the most expensive internet.
But both of us had our phones out. Both of us had, we were on.
I was looking
social
at
media and
play-by-play online just so I could see.
Just
oh my god!
Watch it. And then by the time it would jump back in, it didn't jump to live. It jumped back to where it was before. So we actually knew the outcome of the fight before the fight was over, from what we saw.
I don't think we're alone in that. I think everybody was disappointed with that.
Okay, so then if that's now your standard of what you're offering, we just all say like, oh, okay, lower your expectations?
Probably. I mean, we're all guilty of it.
That's a tough pill to swallow.
Well, I don't know, but obviously people are still paying for those type of services. But in a huge swing, we see a lot of restaurants going out of business right now. A lot.
But luckily, if you happen to swing by C.O.R.E Physical Therapy and Sports Performance, we still have the epitome of good service for your dollar. We don't even make
tips.
I know.
Maybe we should request tips.
And that's neither here nor there. We do have some patients that bring us food, which is nice.
That's like a good tip.
Yeah, a culinary tip, if you will.
I mean, if a patient comes in post-operatively and they're nauseous and you hold a basket for them to throw up in, I think you should probably get a tip for that. They wouldn't do that at a restaurant for you. No, they might clean it up, but they'd be pissed.
There are days like that. There are days where I'm like, I have the best job ever, and then there are days, not as much anymore, but there are days occasionally that you're like, I don't make enough money. Someone want to give me a tip for that? Yeah. But like I said, luckily, if you swing by C.O.R.E Physical Therapy, we are still service-based for a flat fee of whatever your insurance is going to pay us.
Yeah, whatever they decide we're worth, even though they don't know us.
Yeah. But comment below. Don't tweet at us. Comment below that if you agree with that, if you disagree. Tell us how the Tyson Paul fight was for you guys. Did you buffer? Are we the anomaly? And
no, we were not the anomaly.
I don't know. Do we need to talk to someone at Netflix? What is our course of action here?
There is none.
Follow us, you guys, on the many multitudes of social media that we are on. We are on the World Wide Web. www.coreomaha.com.
There's a lot of people out there that don't know that www.
Well, I'm here to drop knowledge.
Even means that.
www.
You're dating
anything
yourself.
is the World Wide Web.
Yeah.
CoreOmaha.com. We are on Facebook as Core Omaha. Core Physical Therapy and Sports Performance. Don't look up Core Omaha on the Facebook. Who's on Facebook anymore? Me. Instagram, Core Omaha. We are on the Twitter we are on X, formerly known as Twitter. I think it's Core Omaha, but we're not on it ever, so don't tweet at us. And then we're not on TikTok, so don't look that up. But shout at us if you guys have any questions, comments, concerns, compliments. Let us know how the Tyson Paul fight was for you. If you're tired Monday morning and you're coming to see us, we are too. I'm Claire.
I'm Mark.
We're out.
Out.